Well, hello all and welcome back to Nightwatch, where we are covering all things security related in the dead of night. And we have to go to this case in Tucson, Arizona, related to Nancy Guthrie, the mother, 84 years old, the mother of Savannah Guthrie, missing from her home. Now look, all of us have heard the basic fact pattern, right? Forced entry, blood droplets in front of the house, at least one ring camera appears to have been ripped out, her phone left behind. The sheriff saying they so far haven't gotten into the camera system. I don't understand that. The phone, did they get in? Is there anything there? We don't know that yet. And then now this reporting comes relative to a potential ransom note. Why a ransom note to TMZ and some local stations, as opposed to the network that Savannah Guthrie works at? That just would be natural. Who would even know about TMZ, and does that have any significance? Let's go into it. So, first of all, I know that her house was near the southern border, but I am skeptical of the idea that somehow or other this is a Mexican cartel or something like that. Could it be? Sure. Could it be something where some sort of garden variety Mexican perps came over the border? Sure. But the idea, think about it now, the idea that they randomly ended up choosing a house that ends up being the mother of a famous person who's on television is pretty remote. Could it happen? Of course it could happen. But you got to play the angles at this point. If you're doing the investigation, you got to go with the stuff that is most likely to try to get a quick solve, because as we've all heard, her life is in danger because of her health issues. Plus there's that blood. So the idea that somehow or other some cartel guys or gangbangers came over the border, looked for an American house, saw this one, grabbed her, and she ends up being Savannah Guthrie's mother, pretty remote, which means it looks targeted. Now, if it's targeted, you got to say to yourself then, okay, who would know to target her and why? Once again, you got to play the odds. It is very unlikely that they targeted this 84-year-old woman when you see the house, because they felt, you know what, it reeks of wealth, and this is somebody that we're going to get after, all right? It's not an ostentatious house. It's nice from what I can see. I saw the aerial photos. There's a pool and all of that. But it's not like, okay, this is a mansion and whoever lives here is worth a fortune, which argues that whoever did it knows this is Savannah Guthrie's mother, and that's the lever. Now, it could be something even more sort of colossally stupid. Somebody breaks in, they didn't know she was there, etc. And we're going to tease it out with Chris Flanagan, who's handled plenty of kidnappings. But I got to go, as I've been articulating here, with the most likely things. Feels to me like this is going to come down to something very mundane. Something like people who knew her, or a person who knew her somehow, maybe not well, tangentially connected. Somebody used to deliver groceries. The guy who used to mow the lawn. Somebody who came, somehow got in the house because he repaired the cable system, or he came in to do some woodworking, anything like that. This is why the phone is so important. Now, you have to assume that the daughter, Savannah, has a good idea about what goes on with her mother, but she may not know everything. She may not know that the mother had to contact somebody, and a lot of mothers, even at that age, are saying, I don't want to bother my daughter. She's on TV. She's got so much to worry about. I don't want to bother her with the fact that the roof is leaking. And so she had people coming in and out. The phone will tell you that. Hopefully the phone backs up to the cloud. So if you can't get into the phone, or you're having a hard time getting into the phone, whatever company it is, you should be able to get most of it out of the cloud. You won't get it all, but you'll get most. And if it backs up to a computer, which is what sunk Hunter Biden, because his phone, the default was to back up onto the computer. You got almost everything that was on his phone on the computer. That, I think, is the most likely fertile route of exploration. There's also reporting about the time this happened, middle of the night. You got to be looking at cars that shouldn't have been there, phones that shouldn't have been there, that jump out at you. And hopefully, even though it's dark, you're going to get cameras in the area that pick up a car, a plate, something like that, that shouldn't be there. The problem, of course, with the car is that Arizona is a one-plate state. The front plate doesn't have to be there, and in many instances it won't be. We saw it with the Koberger case. The other thing you're going to do, you're going to go backwards. You're not just looking at the night of. You got to go backwards to see was anybody around the house. If you do get into the cloud system to see the camera work, was there anybody around the house in the previous week or two that shouldn't have been there? You're going to do everything you can to recreate her life. And then the last possibility my mind goes to, first of all, I go to the Mingione case. He's innocent until proven guilty, but he was nowhere near as clever as he thought he was, if indeed he is convicted, because he did all kinds of recon work, but that sunk him because they picked him up scouting the place out. All right, he also dropped the phone. I also think of, and it's sad to say because it's a tragic case, the old Truman Capote in Cold Blood. If you haven't seen the movie or read the book, they're both really good. The original movie is really stark and very affecting. But what happened there is that the two perps heard about this house, and it was just a rumor that the house had a lot of money in it. The family was very, very rich. They were a prominent family in Kansas, and so they got out of jail with the plan to rob that family in a home invasion. And ultimately, whatever went on inside, they killed the family and the two of them were executed. And that's what the movie's about. But that kind of thing happens as well, with people in jail saying, I know a house where the mother's 84 years old, the place is unguarded, and you know what? Her daughter is a millionaire, famous figure, and who will pay through the nose to get her out. I go to stuff like that. Very prosaic, very localized, and I go back to Frank Sinatra Jr., of all people. It's the most famous kidnapping that I can think of, because kidnappings are quite rare as are successful kidnappings. Frank Sinatra Jr. got snatched in the 1960s, and ultimately Sr. had to pay a ransom. And apparently, I don't remember it. I don't even think I was alive when it happened, but there were all these rumors and theories. It's the mafia, it's the Russians, it's the CIA, whatever. And it turns out it was just two local knuckleheads, I think from a casino, who were falling all over each other, and ultimately they were such blunderers that not only did they get Junior back, but they arrested both of them. I'm hopeful that that is the way this is going to go, and if I had to bet my pension, I would bet that, as opposed to something very sophisticated. But let's see, because they got this ransom note asking for crypto, and that's a whole nother vector in this. But let's bring in Chris Flanagan. Chris, those of you who know the podcast know him. He was the commanding officer of Major Case. Major Case, by definition, catches all of the kidnappings in New York City. City of 8.5 million people, that's going to be a lot of reports of kidnappings. And that likely makes him the person who's handled more kidnappings than anybody else in the country. Let's go to the case now. Let's go to the Guthrie case. Nancy Guthrie, the mother, 84 years old. We don't have to recount the facts. It's all over the news. So I got to ask you, I'm just going to ask you a blanket question. What's your take on this one? Where do you start? And does it feel legit to you? Or what do you think's going on?
Yeah, so this one is tough to explain. But there's a couple things I think I'd probably be looking at right away. First of all, you got to treat it as a kidnapping from the get-go, but you also have to explore like all the other possibilities at the same time and give like equal weight probably to all of them. Is it possible that this was like a burglary? The burglar broke into the house, cut himself going in, and then the mother's there, and they removed her to cover up their crime. They thought the house was empty, maybe. They cased
Mm-hmm.
it out earlier. The lady's not home.
Right.
And then they come back later and she's home, and that's a surprise to them. Possibility.
Why would they
Um,
take her though? Like even like would they take her? Carry her out
I've
if it,
nah, I've never. I mean, I've never seen that happen,
Right.
but
You
I
don't
think
know.
it's
Yeah, they're
it's just as
surprised.
possible as the
Yeah, right, right.
stranger kidnapping. Um, you don't know. Perps panic. They do stupid things. That's why they're perps, and that's why they get caught.
Yeah.
Um, but it's hard to tell without some of the evidence that some of the facts that the sheriff.
Yeah, we're
Uh,
speculating completely.
yeah, you're speculating. Like when we did kidnappings, like the one kind of rule of thumb was to keep the case as confidential as possible. You didn't want it getting out that the cops were involved. Even you would hold back information about ransom calls. So it's possible they're getting a ransom call, but
Mm.
it doesn't feel like that to me. And really, if you're doing a kidnapping of a stranger, that's the motivation. So
The
the
ransom.
fact that they don't see it and it doesn't seem to follow at this point is kind of makes it seem like it's pointing in a different direction.
So you're not buying, Dan, you and I talked about this. You're not buying the emailed ransom note that went to TMZ and apparently a couple of local stations that's saying we want millions in Bitcoin, and then
Yeah.
apparently describing the interior of the house and what she was wearing. Now, the sheriff has not confirmed that that's what she was wearing or that's what the interior of the house looks like. He just said, "Yeah, we're aware of it."
Yeah,
You're
it
not
mentioned it
buying this.
mentioned it mentioned the door and some clothing and some other facts, and without knowing specifically what how accurate that information is, it really doesn't tell you anything. But the fact that it comes out, it gets sent to TMZ
Yeah, weird, weird.
shortly after the press conference, and that it's the crypto's common now, but um, it seems like that would likely be a hoax. And I think what I would do if I was running that case is I would have the FBI come in because they're very good at that.
Yeah, no, they're in
Um,
it. Yeah,
and
yeah,
and and
yeah.
then spin off like a separate investigation, keep them in the loop. But you want to dedicate your main case detective and the main resources to the more likely avenues.
Yeah,
Um,
and they are in it, and I think that's almost certainly what they're doing because the local sheriff's office said, let's assume whoever sent the ransom note at least had the wit to, let's say, use a VPN, a virtual private network to try to guard where they are. You don't need the bureau to kind of do some of this thing, to break the onion router. But we don't know how sophisticated they are. But let me ask you this:
yeah, but
since
if
you,
it's 3 days later, I mean, I'd almost be pretty sure it's a hoax.
all right, but we don't know. I mean, she's definitely missing.
Definitely missing.
And so, we don't know. You got to do it. And so if that's the case and you have the FBI doing it, let me ask you this, since you go to operational, what you know, what do? You're running this case. What hoax, not a hoax. You can't find her. She's definitely not there. And she apparently needs her medication. There's a very good chance that she could potentially die within the window that they have her. Where are you going first?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'm doing is obviously processing the crime scene. I'm doing a complete search of the house. I'm doing a search of the immediate area of the house. Like maybe she died in the commission of burglary, and they took her shortly away from a short distance from the house and you know buried the body or disposed of the body. I So I'd be checking those things. I'd have, maybe patrol and a couple of detectives checking that. I'd also be doing a very heavy hospital canvas. Maybe she was injured. They don't want a homicide on their hands and they drop her off at a hospital, maybe even a hospital in Mexico. I definitely have people down there
Right,
checking on that angle. I'd be
right.
checking with Border Patrol for exits day in the days before and then immediately after the incident, which appeared to happen around 2 o'clock. They leave her
Yeah.
phone behind. They lose contact. My main concern when I have a case like this is recovering the person, and if it turns out to be not what it seemed, or even if I blow the prosecution or making collars, then so be it.
Right.
That's what you got to do, and I think um, our inclination with these type of cases was to keep the media out of it. Um, and but when you have a victim who's 85, there's evidence of blood, she needs medication, has a pacemaker, you really don't have a long time to wait to go public and get as much information out to the public and from the public as you can. But one of the trade-offs is you get a million tips, you get fake ransom calls, you get all sorts of nonsense that muddies the water of the investigation.
So let's go to that because one of the things that surprises me is that she reportedly had some version of exterior cameras, ring camera kind of things, and at least one of them was ripped out or removed. Now, there's disparate reporting. Some say it was ripped out, some say it's just not there where it should have been. Some are saying that it's in the rear of the house. I've heard also that it's in the front of the house. Most reliable reporting is that it's in the front of the house, wherever it is. They're saying there were a number of cameras, and yet the sheriff is saying that they quote unquote haven't gotten into them yet. Uh, these things are cloud based these days. You call Amazon or you call whoever runs it,
Yeah, right,
ADT or
whatever.
whatever, and you get, you guys don't even need a search
So,
warrant. It's exigent. What
so
do you make of that?
you know what? Just as I'm thinking about it, you remember last year they had those that migrant bird crew who was targeting
Yeah.
a bunch of NFL players. I believe they were using a device to interfere with the camera communications.
Mm,
So if it was a burg, then maybe they did that. Or if it was a kidnapping, they might have done that too.
Right,
I
right.
just find it would be so unusual that that would be your target. Random kidnappings are so unusual to begin with in this country, and that would be your target, and then you have potentially no way of getting a ransom demand to the family.
No,
It
I get it. But
just seems
on the
like
other hand,
improbable.
they are near Mexico, and as you said, in Latin America, Central South America, it is a little bit more common.
Yeah,
And she's
Ecuador and Colombia, they happen regularly.
they happen regularly, yes. So, and now, I don't know what happened here, and I'm not casting any aspersions on Mexicans or anything like that, but you can't ignore the fact that she's within, I think it's like an hour and change from a foreign country. And I am surprised that we're not getting more clarity about the cameras because, but you and I both know. How often did you say, oh, good, there's a camera? And then when you go to the camera because it's going to give you everything you want because it's perfectly positioned, it's right there, the camera's not working because they didn't update the credit card or because the email changed or the company went out of business. Or like you say, maybe they used a device of some sort, which is pretty sophisticated, but that South American crew was doing it. And finally, last quick thing here on Nightwatch because I can't let this go past me. News breaks this week that there is a new film relative to the murder of JFK. I was just talking about Sinatra. He was part of that whole Camelot situation with JFK in the early 60s. Apparently, there's a film that the feds have been sitting on for 50 years that's going to shed some light above the Zapruder film. Now, the JFK shooting, murder, etc., has been a source of great fascination for conspiracy theorists of all sorts. And I got to admit, I was very caught up in it for a while as well. I read the books and everything else. And I know that there are a number of books out there that'll say things like it's the CIA, Mafia, Russians, combination of all three. And there are other books, one of which is apparently considered to be very researched and maybe the definitive, that says, no, it's what it looked like. It was just Oswald. I'm going to go out on a limb here before this new film comes out to see. I was talking to David Mamet, the film producer. We had him on the podcast. And in fact, when this new film comes out, I'll re-release that podcast because he is a filmmaker, a brilliant filmmaker, a brilliant guy. And one of the things he says is that the original Zapruder film, not the one that's about to come out, the film that we all know, was tampered with. In his words, Paul, I'm a filmmaker. I can tell. And he gave me the actual numbers of the frames that are deleted. Now, that guy's forgotten more about film work than I'll ever know, and so I believe him. So what does that tell you? Something went on. Here's where I'm going. Folks, the Mafia killed him. I'm telling you that's the story. All right? They felt screwed by the fact that they were supposed to get Cuba back. He didn't send in the air support for the Bay of Pigs. The CIA had been using the Mafia to do hits. That is unquestioned. If you want to read the history, go into the FBI, look at something called The Vault. Look at the reporting relative to Sam Giancana, the boss of Chicago. Between Giancana, a guy named Marcello who ran New Orleans, and a guy named Trafficante, they had the means, the motive, they had everything you need. And it just smacks of a Mafia hit. Because think about this. Oswald, the first thing he said when they got him was, I'm just a patsy, I'm just a patsy. And then he gets killed by Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby was a hitter. His real name was Jake Rubenstein. He was a Jewish gangster who worked for Carlos Marcello, who was a mafioso in New Orleans. He was a bouncer in a club and ran a club for Marcello. So I'm supposed to believe it's a coincidence that the guy who kills Oswald to shut him up happens to be a mafiosi himself? Bullshit. All right? The Mafia killed him. I do think that there were agents, I don't think it was sanctioned all the way up the chain, but there were likely rogue agents from the agency, CIA, who knew about it, maybe assisted, and this stuff about the Zapruder film, I can't really explain, but I got to trust David Mamet because, like I say, he knows more about it than I do. This new film could shed some really light. It's really interesting. So when it comes out, we'll talk about it here. That's this week's Night Watch. We'll talk to you soon. In the meantime, all of you, please stay safe.